Greetings and thanks to all of the laborers with the Ministry of Education. Want to definitely say thank you to Sister Deborah Muhammad and Brother Troy 5X. My name is Brother Fredrick Douglass, and before we begin, I bear witness that there's no God but Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, who raised amongst us the exalted Christ, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and who left in our midst his prize student, his pupil, the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. In their names, I greet you with the words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. To be invited to prepare for building a new world through education is indeed exciting, and it indeed is our call, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has called for the educators, which he said were brilliant educators, to produce an educational paradigm that was outside of the narrative. Again, my name is Brother Fredrick Douglass, and I've been tasked with creating a course for the Building a New World paradigm. And that particular course and that subject is very vital, and it is challenging as well, especially to me personally. So the topic is Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee University, and the Supreme Wisdom Lessons. Now, when we think about Booker T. Washington and his importance, I was always of the mindset, with my very limited view historically of Booker T. Washington, as that he was an accommodationist. He was himself a linchpin between control through his paradigm of education, or what some would call the Uncle Tom. Some would call a sellout. So that was my basic mindset as a instructor, and that's the way I forwarded his legacy. And due to the scope, the expanding scope, and the brilliance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who asked us to look deeply into the legacy of Booker T. Washington, I'm here today to attempt to create a course, and it's a mini course, 4 weeks. So if you've ever had a 16-week course that stretches out through the semester, or you've ever had a 11-week course which stretches out through the quarter, this would be double time, if you will. So this isn't just a sprint. This is the quickest of sprints to have 4 weeks for this mini course. Again, the name of the course, Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee University, and the Supreme Wisdom Lessons. Now I'm going to read for you the course description. This mini course will incorporate a historical and interdisciplinary examination, exploration, and critical analysis of the legacy of Booker T. Washington, the creation of Tuskegee University, and the Supreme Wisdom Lessons interpreted through the prism of Black studies. Central concepts and ideas utilized in this mini course derive from the social movement theories, including education, political science, psychology, religion, and sociology. Hence, this course is interdisciplinary, but it is indeed a historical course through a historical lens. The major goal for this course to explore how and to what extent the philosophies of Booker T. Washington transformed the economic, social, and political trajectory of blacks in America. Now, creating this course was very challenging again, because in a 4-week course, it does not allow enough time, but it does allow enough time to study Booker T. Washington's entire legacy. But what it does allow is for a group to begin the process of reevaluating Booker T. Washington from that frame of mind that's outside of the dominant narrative. So the goals, we'll go over the goals, and we'll go over what this course will look like. And I think that for those who will enroll in this class and for those who will participate in this class, it is intended to be a course that will have you realign your thoughts about Booker T. Washington's legacy and why the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan brought to the world the importance of Tuskegee, and he even called it the seminal fluid. So in that regard, we will look at Booker T. Washington in an entirely different light. So one of the goals, students will critically assess and interpret Booker T. Washington's legacy and philosophies outside the dominant narrative of mainstream education, particularly utilizing supreme wisdom lessons to provide a concise and thorough understanding. So as we tie the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad through the supreme wisdoms given to him by Master Fredrick Muhammad, to whom praises are due forever, we want to make sure that this course is one of those courses where we deeply dissect this particular thought of Booker T and how the lessons, the supreme wisdom lessons, become our primary guide and primary source to understanding a very important person in history and a person that we should look at a tad bit differently. Now, one of the goals as a sub-goal, to extensively trace how the progression and the career and the philosophical insights of Booker T. Washington impacted opportunities and paradigms for the advancement of blacks at the turn of the 20th century and beyond. That's where the legacy comes in. 2, to examine the conceptual and strategic tensions with the model of practical education as it compares to a classical formal education and both of their assumed connotations. 3, to critically analyze the influence of the considerations of Booker T. Washington and how his impressions persuaded the American national conscience. So this will take on a conscious reflection of what Booker T provided for years and where it stands now. Student learning outcomes. We'll go through 3. To instruct students on the fundamental skills of historical analysis and examination. To locate and distinguish between primary and secondary sources for research. And 3, create a written discourse that cogently utilizes appropriate source considerations. So this particular course will be interdisciplinary, as we discussed. It will also involve key terms, key historical eras that mesh together to give us a very candid view of how to realign and how to re-educate ourselves to look at Booker T. Washington. So we'll look at the terms, and some of the terms you've heard before: accommodation. We'll look at the idea of the importance of agriculture, economic development, economic sustainability, entrepreneurship, philanthropy, self-determination, self-sufficiency. We'll look at Tuskegee University through those lights, a vocational training. So as we dissect this historical person, his historical legacy, we have to make sure that for a clear understanding, we look at the time in which he lived, being born as a slave up until his death in 1914. We want to be very clear about how Booker T. Washington's legacy should be taught in a classroom outside of the mainstream narrative. Then we have to look at the historical narrative. And we have to look at, with the historical narrative, we have to look at the eras. And we have to separate them, compartmentalize them, dissect them, and look to them for what we call it post facto, what happened prior, ex post facto, what happened as a direct result of those historical eras. So the historical era that we'll begin with for this particular class is Reconstruction. We'll look directly at 1865 to 1877, and we'll dissect the importance of laws. We'll dissect what we call de facto and de jure laws. So we will move straight through to Jim Crow, and in Jim Crow, we'll break Jim Crow down into a compartment, and one compartment of a essential line of reasoning will be the nadir of the American lynching movement. So we'll do research to hash out, flesh out the laws that were created, how they were enacted. And we'll look to those as a guiding light to how we should create a narrative to be forwarded to students in this particular thought. Reconstruction, we mentioned that. World War I. All of these historical eras become very important as we continue to interrogate and investigate the legacy and philosophies of Booker T. Washington. So we have an extensive amount of reading. For a student who will enroll in this class, it is very content heavy. It will be looked to as a severe training in understanding historical readings and how you pull those apart. So we will give techniques and strategies that will allow a person who's never read a history book to become more tuned on how to proceed and extracting the most important parts of the history while challenging all of the story and the narrative. So this course will be friendly for those of you who are instructors, those of you who are students, and those of you who are laypersons. So this is very friendly towards the entire population. So I find it very serious that we look at this topic, and the way that we look at this topic allow itself to reach the masses in a concerted effort to reach those who are not formally educated. We will provide strategies and techniques that will allow this particular subject to be taught in a way that is very amenable to the student. So the books that we will be using, and these are in alphabetical order, The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935 by Dr. James D. Anderson, which is the seminal book on the education of blacks in the South during that period. The Supreme Lessons, Part 1 and 2. Dr. Abul Petrie, The Educational Philosophy of Elijah Muhammad, Education for a New World. Dimitri Muhammad and Ilya Rashad Muhammad, A Complete Dictionary of the Supreme Wisdom Lessons. Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. And Ida B. Wells, Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Favors. So beside that, we have for primary sources a host of articles that will bring in the layered nuances and expose the complexities in each one of these historical eras. So Robert Chenault's Pragmatism and Progressivism in the Educational Thought and Practice of Booker T. Washington. The Education Contribution to Booker T. Washington by Booker T. Gardner. The Role of Tuskegee Institute, Alan Jones, and Theodore Lewis, Booker T. Washington's Audacious Vocationalist Philosophy. The videos will come from a myriad of speeches. They will come from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, The Time and Much Must Be Done, Part 33, and when he spoke at Tuskegee University, March 26, 2003, and we will dissect, for clarity and depth, Booker T. Washington's, perhaps his most famous speech, The Atlanta Compromise. So what's at stake here? What's at stake for building a new world is to provide new lines of reasoning, practical thought, avenues to indeed absorb information. That is the gist of this course. The gist of this course is to provide for you a historical background that is outside the mainstream narrative. For all of you who plan to enroll in this course, we look forward to connecting with you, discussing this worthy topic with you, and doing our best to bring the light of understanding under the searchlight of truth. I thank you all for this time, and as your brother and your servant, it is my greatest pleasure to introduce this topic and to have a chance to speak with you and forward information about this topic. I greet you all in peace as I close. Assalamu alaikum.